So I wanted to do a video on the tail of the tape between Mikey Garcia and Errol Spence. They're scheduled to fight March 16th on Fox pay-per-view at the At&t Cowboy Stadium in Arlington, Texas, in the Dallas area. Shout out to Crown Boxing for creating this flyer. And shout out to PBC for the Fight Camp series on Fox. Mikey Garcia was born in 1987, makes him 31 years old. Errol Spence, born in 1990. He just had a birthday a few days ago, makes him 29. So there's only roughly a 2-year age difference. Um, Mikey turned pro at the age of 18 in 2006. Errol Spence turned pro at the age of 22 after attending the Olympics. Mikey's professional record is 39-0 with 30 knockouts. He currently holds the belt, the WBC belt at 135 and the IBF belt at 135 for the fight against Easter. He's an orthodox fighter. He's going to have a disadvantage of 3 inches in height and a disadvantage of 4 inches in reach. And he's campaigned at 126, 130, 135, and 140. This is his debut at 147. Errol Spence Jr. is 24-0 with 21 knockouts. He is currently the IBF welterweight champion at 147. He's a southpaw fighter, and his height is 5'9". His reach is 72 inches, and his entire professional career has been at 147. Mikey Garcia's trainers are his brother and his dad and his nephew, Robert Eduardo and Pita. He used Snack for strength and conditioning. Remy Corchemi was his strength and conditioning coach in San Jose. I think it was roughly 4 or 5 weeks, a couple weeks in December and 2 to 3 weeks in January. And then I believe he is using Daryl Hudson as his strength and conditioning coach while back here in Riverside. His last fight was July 28th at the Staples Center against Robert Easter. The crowd attendance was 12,560. His last 2 views on Showtime have been 618 average and a peak of 689 versus Sergey Lipinets. And then for the Easter fight, he had an average of 680 with a peak of 725,000. Errol Spence is trained by Derek James, and Blue Ray Fitness is his strength and conditioning coach. It sounds like Blue Ray Fitness. I think he said he gets Errol Spence once he's already in shape, so turns to come in at the end of camp. Errol Spence's last fight was June 16th at the Ford Center in Frisco, Texas. The crowd attendance was 12,604, so very similar to Mikey's attendance of 12,000 at the Staples Center in LA. And I didn't have any research on his past performances, but he did get 4 to 5 million views. I believe it was on CBS when they showed Errol Spence versus Leonard Bondu a couple years ago on I believe it was CBS. Mikey's last 9 opponents have been Orlando Salido, where he got his championship belt at, I believe it was at 130. And then he lost it on the scales versus Juan Manuel Lopez. And then I believe he moved up to, or that might have been in 126. Then I think he fought Roman Martinez at 130. Juan Carlos Burgos, and then he had a 2-year layoff. And then he had a comeback fight versus Elio Rojas, where the fight was contracted at 140. But I believe Mikey maybe even made 138. For sure made 139, possibly made even 138 to prove that he was still had the capability to get down as low as 135. Then he won the WBC belt against Dejan Slatichinin. Then he fought Adrian Broner, and then he campaigned at 140 and won an IBF belt at 140 versus Sergey Lipinets for the IBF strap. And then his last title was the IBF at 135 versus Robert Easter. Errol Spence. Last 9 opponents have been Samuel Vargas and Phil Logreco. Phil Logreco, I saw one of his interviews the other day and said that he was given a short notice of the fight. and after the first or second round, that he was totally gassed. Most of the struggle for him was just to make the weight, um, and after the first or second round, that he was just fighting uh, just to hang in there. The Chris Van Heerden fight is a very good performance by Errol Spence. Chris Van Heerden showed a lot of heart. Um, I really enjoyed that fight. Alejandro Barrera, Chris Algieri. Chris Algieri um, had a lot of fights around this time. He had fights against Manny Pacquiao, and he had fights against other top fighters. Um, but Errol Spence took care of business there. And then there's that fight that I was talking about with great exposure after the Olympics on free TV versus Leonard Bundu. Then Errol Spence traveled to England and challenged Kell Brook for the IBF title, and that's where he became champion. I believe it was a crowd of 30,000 people, and that he went across the pond and went to the champion's hometown and defeated him. Actually, broke his orbital bone. That's how you pronounce it. And then he's had two title defenses after that. One versus Lamont Peterson, and then another in Dallas, Texas, with Carlos Ocampo. Very recently, Oscar De La Hoya said at the Canelo Jacobs press conference in LA that he is going for Mikey, but that the reality is that Spence has the edge to win, coming from the Golden Boy Promotions promoter, ex multi-division world champion Oscar De La Hoya. And then what shook up the world, Sugar Ray Leonard was asked who he was going for in the Spence versus Mikey bout, and Leonard responded that he thinks Mikey will win. And then when questioned further about why he thinks Mikey will win, Sugar Ray did not give an elaborate response, but simply said, because he's Mikey. So Sugar Ray Leonard happens to be Errol Spence's hero, is what I've heard. Very interesting perspective from Sugar Ray Leonard. Virgil Hunter says that Mikey should fight Spence on fight night at his prime sparring weight, whether that be 141, 145, or 147. Robert Garcia recently said that Mikey's weight 10 days before fight date is around 155, 157. So it sounds like Mikey's prime sparring days might be past him at this point, with the fight being so close. It sounds like the Big G, Eduardo Garcia, his dad, and Robert, his brother, clearly want to be careful that there aren't any injuries before fight night, and clearly not suffer an injury that would cause the fight to be canceled, with the fight being pretty much less than 10 days around the corner. Keith Thurman believes that the height difference doesn't help Mikey, that Errol's right hook, if it's the right hook that gives Mikey trouble, that because of the height difference, that Errol will be able to hit Mikey right in the face with the left hook over Mikey's left jab. Errol Spence doesn't have to make an adjustment. Where Errol's shoulder lines up with Mikey's face and his jawline. So this is all coming from Keith Thurman. Errol's going to be able to throw hooks while Mikey's jabbing. He's going to be able to utilize his jab, and Spence has a really, really good jab. And then he continues by saying, what I don't like about Mikey fighting Errol Spence is not the fact that he's taking the fight, but it's about who he's fought before. And now he's trying to take this fight. Keith Thurman says, I just don't think he's testing the welterweight division properly. And Errol Spence is not Adrian Broner, and Errol Spence is not Robert Easter. Keith Thurman is not Robert Easter. So at the end of the day, when he was calling us out, this is coming from Keith Thurman, this is what he wanted us. And then he continues by saying he just told another reporter exactly what he had just said previously. Like he said, he's got a lot of tricks up his sleeves, and then he ends the interview by saying he better be 10 fella with the magic. Excuse me. Recently, Tim Bradley has come and said that it's Errol's lack of head movement that has Mikey thinking he can beat Errol or give him some problems. The interview came out sometime during this week in February 2019. Spence will throw, and then he stays there, says Bradley. He'll catch a couple, but he's right there to be hit, right down the middle. That's the only thing I see Bradley continues by saying it can go the distance, or Spence will get him out of there late. It's going to be late. One of the most intriguing interviews by Max Kellerman. We had some interesting things to say about Mikey and Spence as he was at the Ford Center at the Star in Frisco, Texas, for Teofimo Lopez fight versus Diego Magdaleno in February of this year. Max says, look, Spence is correctly the favorite in my view. Spence is a young, athletic fighter who has skills and is very tough. You've seen him fights where you're like, that's not exactly going his way, talking about Spence. Kell Brook was doing something to disrupt, and he did not get discouraged, and he can punch. Again, it's a rare combination. The athletic fighter who can punch and has some skills and is tough and is willing to use those skills aggressively. A lot of times fighters can hide behind, if they have a big athletic advantage, they can hide behind that and minimize risk. To just, why not? Just play it safe. This is all coming from Max Kellerman. When you see a guy that is like, nah, I can punch, I'm fast, I'm going to get this over with, that connects with the fans differently. Spence is the real deal. That's why the real fight everyone wants to see in and around that weight class is Crawford, who you know is the real deal, and Spence. Because Spence has a little natural size advantage to offset some of Crawford's skill advantage. All this is coming from Max Kellerman. Continues by saying that's the fight everyone wants to see. In the meantime, because of the way boxing is structured, we get the fight that we didn't ask for, but the fight that we are not mad at. Mikey is brave and a very confident guy. He believes in his skills. He fights dispassionately. It's not with a sense of urgency or anything. And that's a very interesting statement because Mikey has come out and said that he kind of took his foot off the gas versus some other fighters, especially with Adrian Broner. A lot of people said that Adrian Broner took a long time to warm up and that he was really putting it on Mikey at the 12th, 11th, and 10th, 11th, and 12th round. But it recently has come out in interviews that Robert was actually giving Mikey instructions in the corner to not take as many risks anymore, that they had the fight in the bag, and to actually slow things down and take less risk. So a lot of people that kind of feel that Mikey was touched to the body or took unnecessary punishment from Broner was pretty much really because Mikey didn't want to take any more risk. He had already won enough rounds to win the fight. So that's all interesting information come afloat very recently. And then Max Kellerman continues by saying he's like Emmanuel Stewart. The late, great Emmanuel Stewart used to talk about Felix Trinidad this way. Killer robot. He programs what he has to do and plans, and the guy is flat on his back. Even at welterweight, where his power isn't the same, it's not like one punch has concussed power. You have to respect his power. He's not just clinical, he's clinical with pop. So it's not out of the question that Mikey can beat Errol Spence. He is the more skillful fighter. He's not as fast. He's not as big a puncher or as big, period, but he has had more time as a pro to refine his skill. So he has real chances in that fight, and hats off to him for making it. Excuse me. The interview continues by saying, what is it that you think Mikey needs to do to win the fight? Max Kellerman replies, I think that it's important that Mikey can still pop at welterweight. I just mentioned, I know, he can still pop, but we've seen him punch enough to kind of get someone's respect. But at the top level at 147, can he hit hard enough to actually break a guy down? Because Spence seems to be the kind of guy that if he's losing a fight, he's going to step on the gas. He seems to have that kind of mentality. So at that point, it's not enough to just continue to box. You have to put something on him to really break him down. And that's what this fight will boil down to. Can Mikey carry the power up to 147 a little better than we've seen? It's not like he hasn't done it at all, but a little more resemble the fighter in lower weight classes that we've seen. If the answer is yes, then he can win the fight. And I did this research maybe a month or two ago, and I wrote this note in here: pugilism company. channel that I might have gotten that Max Kellerman interview from. And I just heard today that he's from Dallas, Texas. So I do that in a pugilism company, and I follow him on YouTube. So if you want to see where I got this interview from of Max Kellerman, it is the pugilism company on YouTube. And then 2, 3, 4 months ago, there was a comment by Nassim Richardson saying Mikey is the Mexican Floyd Mayweather. I believe it was meant to say that he was raised around boxers and around boxing gyms from a very young age and his entire life. We learned based on a comment that Eduardo Garcia, his dad, said on ES News recently that Mikey was sparring Manny Pacquiao at the young age of, and then I've done more research on it, and it's actually, he was 17 and he actually turned 18 while Manny Pacquiao was gearing up for the second fight versus Eric Morales. So I've done more research and I've pinpointed where exactly it was. But the fight 12 weeks away, Mikey Puta, Star Trek, blah blah blah. I don't. This is an old slide that I had. I'm going to take this one out of here. But there was mention on ES News that Darrell Hudson is continuously doing strength and conditioning with Mikey in Riverside in preparation for the March 16th bout versus Errol. And then via Dante's Boxing Nation, Tim Bradley says Mikey has to use his speed in defense, just like Sugar Ray Leonard did against Hearn. Errol will be coming forward all night and eventually will get tired. Then he'll start to make mistakes. Excuse me. He follows up and says he doesn't think Mikey has a chance at winning. Tim says that the fight will show that Errol is not invincible and this kid can be hit and get touched. He also added that he puts Crawford over Spence too. He definitely thinks Crawford can move and give Errol angles and set traps and make him pay. Omar Figueroa says that he sparred Errol Spence 11 years ago and beat him once in the amateurs. He said he still feels a punch from Errol to this day. In an interview, he said Mikey gets knocked out. The interview took place at the Fox Studios as PBC rolled out their schedule for the first quarter of 2019. And then another trainer, Abel Sanchez, says Mikey sees that Errol is green, meaning that he is not as experienced as a seasoned pro with only 24 fights. And then I wrote that it would be interesting now that the fight is actually closer to see if Abel has the actual breakdown of the fight. Julio Cesar Chavez refused to answer the question when Bernardo Osuna asked him live on the show A Los Golpes on ESPN, and that led me to believe that Chavez thinks that Mikey does not have a chance in beating the much bigger Osuna. Trainer Joel Diaz says Mikey dropped Robert Easter but couldn't finish him at 135. Errol could easily fight at 154. Mikey dominates at 135 and he even does well at 140, but 147 is another level. And Joel doesn't believe if his power can carry to 147. Joe was also asked if Mikey beats Loma at 135, and then he said that he thinks Loma wins in a decision versus Mikey. That Loma moves a lot and will win rounds based on that. If Mikey catches Loma, he can hurt him, but Loma will be moving and not getting hit. That's the statement from Joel. And then today, this is an old statement via ES News. Robert Garcia says that originally he and Mikey watched the fight between Errol and Lamont Peterson in early 2018. He didn't notice what Mikey was talking about when Mikey said, I see something in Errol that I can take advantage of if I fight him. Robert said he was watching the fight as a fan and not as a trainer. Robert went ahead and said, the more I see Errol Spence fights, the more chance I give Mikey to win the fight versus Errol Spence. He says Errol is very talented and skilled, and it is a risky fight, but that now he sees what he was talking about. Robert also shared on ES News that after he goes home from the gym, he watches video on fighters' opponents. He has mentioned on different media outlets that he has seen Gervonta Tank Davis fights. He was scheduled to fight Abner Mares, and now we know that fight was canceled. And then he also replied to Fred from Barbershop Conversations on an interview that he didn't get anything out of the Spencer Campbell fight because it was only a round or so, but that he sees Errol's fight versus Cal Brook and Lamont Peterson study. And then earlier this week, so now that makes that a couple months ago, Fight Hub TV interviewed Robert, and Marcus Villegas said that he was going to tell Robert off camera that what he thinks is the flaw in Errol's fight game and Mikey's. And fight game that Mikey is talking about. When Marcos whispered in Robert Garcia's ear, Robert responded by telling Marcos Villegas that he knew his boxing. So that'll be interesting. We'll see what that is after the fight, and if what Marcos Villegas said was actually true. Robert mentioned on the Fighter's Voice that Spence took a lesser payday to move the fight from Las Vegas to Dallas. It was also revealed recently that Errol Spence has left money on the table, meaning he's taking less money in the contracts in order to promote his man down promotion. There's an excellent breakdown of the fight in regards to foot movement and range by Casual Boxing Talk on YouTube. So if you have time, go check that out. I was thoroughly impressed by Casual Boxing Talk and the breakdown of that. So if you're interested, Casual Boxing Talk on YouTube. Please like and subscribe on Sonteo Media on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Instagram, Sonteo_media.